I still remember the day my own daughter looked me in the eyes and called me an extra mouth. Her words cut deeper than any knife ever could. It was a chilly morning, the kind where the air seeps into your bones. I had just finished folding laundry when I heard the sharp sound of my name being called from the living room. My daughter, Sophia, sat on the couch with her husband, Daniel. Their faces were tight, rehearsed almost, as if they had been preparing for this conversation. I thought perhaps they were going to ask me for help with the children, or maybe they wanted me to cook for their guests. But when I sat down, Sophia didn't even meet my eyes. "Mom," she began, her voice clipped and cold. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. She went on, explaining how times were hard, how money was tight, how the house felt too crowded. Every word was heavy with irritation, like I was some unbearable burden pressing down on her shoulders. Then Daniel added, "It's not personal, really. But we just can't afford another mouth to feed." Another mouth. That's all I was to them. Not a mother. Not the woman who had sacrificed her youth to raise her daughter alone. Not the one who had worked double shifts just to pay for her university, her wedding, and even the down payment for this very house. No, to them I was just an extra mouth. I tried to reason with them. My voice trembled as I reminded Sophia of the nights I went hungry so she could eat, of the years I wore the same worn-out shoes so she could have books for school. But my words fell on deaf ears. "Please, Sophia," I whispered. "I have nowhere else to go." She finally looked at me then, but her eyes were cold, empty. "I'm sorry, Mom. You'll have to figure something out." Daniel stood, already reaching for my small suitcase, the one I had brought when I moved in after my husband's death. He placed it at my feet like a cruel period at the end of their sentence. I sat frozen for a moment, unable to breathe. My own daughter, the little girl I once carried in my arms, the child I once nursed through fevers and nightmares, was now casting me out like unwanted furniture. The grandchildren peeked from the hallway, confused. "Grandma, where are you going?" one of them asked, their innocent eyes wide. Sophia snapped, "Go back to your room." My chest tightened as I bent down, hugging them one last time, inhaling their warm, familiar scent. I didn't want them to see my tears, but they fell anyway, sliding down my cheeks as I kissed their foreheads. And then, I walked out. The door shut behind me with a dull thud that echoed in my heart. I stood on the cold pavement, suitcase in hand, staring at the house I had helped them build, the home that no longer had room for me. Neighbors walked by, glancing at me with pity in their eyes. I lowered my head, too ashamed to meet their gaze. I was 68 years old, a widow, and now homeless. As I dragged my suitcase down the street, my mind replayed every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every drop of sweat I had poured into giving my daughter a better life. And this was my reward. I could have collapsed then, right there on the sidewalk, swallowed whole by despair. But instead, something inside me hardened. Yes, I was broken. Yes, I was humiliated. But in that moment I made a silent vow. I will never forget this. One day, they will feel the sting of this same humiliation. I didn't know how and I didn't know when. But I promised myself as I wiped the last of my tears, that this was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning. The first night after Sophia threw me out was the longest of my life. I had no plan, no savings tucked away, no hidden key to a secret apartment. All I had was my old suitcase and the few dollars in my purse. I found myself sitting at a bus stop long after midnight, the streetlights humming above me, their glow painting long shadows across the pavement. My body ached from the cold bench, but it was the ache inside my chest that nearly broke me. I thought about walking back, about begging on my knees for Sophia to take me in, but my pride held me still. If they saw me desperate, they would win. And something deep in my bones refused to give them that satisfaction. So I stayed there until dawn. By morning, I dragged myself to a community shelter. The smell of bleach mixed with stale soup filled the air. Strangers with hollow eyes sat hunched over cots, their lives crammed into plastic bags. I felt out of place, like I didn't belong, but the truth was I did. I was one of them now. As I lay on a thin mattress that creaked with every breath, I replayed Sophia's words again and again. An extra mouth. Every syllable tore into me. I wanted to scream, to ask the universe why I had given everything only to end up here. But instead, I swallowed my grief and kept my silence. Days blurred into weeks. I searched for small jobs, anything to keep me from sinking completely. Washing dishes in a diner. Folding clothes at a thrift store. My hands, once soft and careful from years of cooking and caring, grew raw and blistered. There were nights I skipped meals so I could stretch my meager earnings. Nights I wrapped myself in my coat because the shelter had run out of blankets. Nights I cried quietly into my pillow so no one else would hear. I was humiliated, forgotten, broken. But in the darkest corners of those nights, a strange fire began to grow inside me. Every time I pictured Sophia's cold eyes, every time I remembered Daniel placing my suitcase at my feet, that fire burned hotter. It whispered to me, they think you're weak. They think you're disposable. Prove them wrong. So I began to watch, to listen, to learn. On my way to and from work, I noticed the neighborhood. The rows of buildings with peeling paint. The for sale signs on crumbling properties. The whispers of tenants about rising rents and greedy landlords. And then one evening, while folding clothes at the thrift store, I overheard a customer mention a building downtown. The very one where Sophia and Daniel rented their apartment. The landlord was tired, getting old, looking to sell. My heart skipped a beat. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. I felt possibility. Of course, I had no money. No savings. But I had knowledge, decades of managing a household, budgeting every penny, stretching every dollar. I knew how to sacrifice. And most importantly, I knew how to endure. That night, as I lay awake in the shelter, I stared at the cracked ceiling and whispered to myself, if I can survive being cast out, I can survive anything. And if they think I am an extra mouth, then I will make them choke on those words. I didn't know how I would buy that building yet. But I knew this. My daughter had taken everything from me. My dignity, my home, my place at the table. Now it was my turn. And when the time came, they would never see it coming. The idea of buying that building gnawed at me day and night. At first it felt absurd. How could a woman with blistered hands and barely enough money for bread dare to dream of owning a whole property? But then I remembered something my late husband once told me. Opportunities are never handed to us. We carve them out of stone with our bare hands. So I began carving. Every spare moment, I devoured books from the library about real estate, property law, and financing. The words were heavy at first, filled with terms that seemed foreign to me, but I forced myself to understand. I scribbled notes in an old notebook I had found at the shelter. Soon its pages were crowded with numbers, ideas, and plans. I listened too. At the diner where I worked, businessmen often spoke loudly over their coffee, careless with their secrets. I caught fragments of conversations about loans, partnerships, and property flips. I memorized everything, piecing the puzzle together. The fire inside me burned brighter each day. Then came my first real step. One afternoon, after my shift at the thrift store, I walked straight into a small local bank. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my head high. I asked to speak with a loan officer. The young man behind the desk looked at me skeptically when I explained my plan. "You want to buy an apartment building?" he asked, his eyebrows climbing. "Yes," I said firmly. My voice did not shake. "And I will pay it off." He chuckled under his breath, as if I were some old fool chasing impossible dreams. But I didn't flinch. I showed him my notebook filled with figures. I explained how the rent from tenants would cover the loan payments, how I would live modestly, save every penny, and take care of the property myself. He leaned back, studying me more carefully this time. I could see his doubt waver just slightly. Still, the loan was not enough. I needed investors, partners, anyone who would believe in me. So I began speaking with people, other women at the shelter, co-workers at the diner, even neighbors who were tired of being at the mercy of greedy landlords. Slowly I gathered small contributions. Not much, but enough to show commitment. Enough to convince others that I was serious. Weeks turned into months. I was exhausted, often working 2 or 3 shifts in a row. But every time I thought of quitting, I remembered Sophia's voice calling me an extra mouth. No, I would prove her wrong. Finally, the day came when the old landlord of the building agreed to meet me. He was a tired man with slumped shoulders and eyes dulled by years of complaints. He wanted out and I wanted in. When I told him my offer, he laughed at first. But then I slid my careful numbers across the table. I explained how I would manage repairs, how I would treat tenants fairly but firmly, how I would keep the building alive instead of letting it rot. By the time I finished, his laughter had faded. He sat in silence, tapping his fingers on the table. "You remind me of my mother," he finally said. "Stubborn as a mule. Fine. Let's see if you can pull this off." I signed the papers with trembling hands, tears stinging my eyes. The building wasn't mine yet, but for the first time since I was cast out, I could see the path. A path toward power. A path toward justice. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was no longer just about survival. This was about revenge. The day the deed to the building was placed in my hands, I felt a surge of power I had never known before. For the first time in years, I wasn't at the mercy of anyone. I was no longer the pitiful woman sitting at a bus stop with nowhere to go. I was an owner. The building itself was nothing glamorous. Cracked bricks, leaky pipes, and hallways that smelled faintly of mildew. But to me it was a kingdom, and I was its queen. My first act was to walk through every corridor, every stairwell, every apartment door. The tenants eyed me warily, expecting another greedy landlord. I greeted them warmly but firmly, and introduced myself as the new owner. Some looked relieved. Others looked skeptical. It didn't matter. Soon they would see. I worked tirelessly. I patched walls, fixed squeaky doors, scrubbed floors. My hands bled, but I pressed on. I kept rent fair but enforced rules strictly. Slowly, respect began to replace suspicion. The building, once neglected, began to feel alive again. And with every nail hammered, every rent check collected, my confidence grew. Then one afternoon, as I was reviewing rent ledgers, a familiar name leapt out at me. Apartment 3B. Tenant. Sophia and Daniel. For a moment the world seemed to stop. My daughter and her husband lived in my building. I gripped the paper so tightly it nearly tore. My heart pounded as memories came flooding back. Sophia's cold eyes, Daniel's smug face as he set down my suitcase. The humiliation. The betrayal. And now fate had placed them right under my roof. I could have laughed. For weeks I said nothing. I continued collecting rent through the building manager, maintaining my cover. I wanted to savor this, to study them as they had once studied me. I learned their rent was low, far below market value, thanks to the laziness of the previous landlord. Low rent that I now had the power to raise. The fire in my chest roared. But I didn't strike immediately. No. Revenge is not a dish you toss on the table half-cooked. It is prepared slowly, carefully, until it is perfect. Instead, I focused on stabilizing my building. I hired a contractor to handle the biggest repairs, negotiated better utility rates, and tightened the finances. The property value began to rise. My tenants, even the skeptical ones, started thanking me. Every success was a small victory, a reminder that I was no longer powerless. And then one evening I saw them, Sophia and Daniel, walking up the front steps with their children. They passed right by me without a second glance. They didn't even recognize me in my work clothes holding a paint bucket. But I recognized them. Oh, I did. And as I watched them unlock the door to 3B, my lips curved into the faintest smile. Because they had no idea. No idea that the woman they had cast out into the cold now held the keys to their future. No idea that every breath they took under that roof was by my permission. And no idea that the rent they so casually paid would soon triple, crushing them just as they once crushed me. For the first time since Sophia shut the door in my face, I felt it. Not despair, not humiliation, but power. And I vowed to wield it carefully, ruthlessly. Because this was only the first victory. The real battle was yet to come. Owning the building gave me leverage. But leverage without action is nothing more than weight sitting idle. I was ready to move. The moment I confirmed Sophia and Daniel's names on that lease, my plan began to sharpen. I spent weeks reviewing every tenant contract, line by line. Most leases were outdated, full of loopholes the previous landlord had ignored. Sophia's apartment was one of them, locked at a laughably low rate that hadn't been updated in years. That was about to change. I filed the necessary notices quietly and legally. Rent adjustments, maintenance fees, updated terms. Across the building, the increases were reasonable, justified by the improvements I was making. No one could accuse me of being unfair. But for apartment 3B, I prepared something special. A tripled rent notice. I didn't drop it in their mailbox immediately. No, iba ita. I wanted to see them first, to hear their voices, to study their faces. One evening, I stationed myself in the lobby with a stack of mail. Sophia walked in, groceries in hand, Daniel trailing behind. For a moment, her eyes met mine. She squinted as if trying to place me. Then she looked away. To her, I was just another maintenance worker. Invisible. The insult almost made me laugh. I handed Daniel their envelope with the same calm smile I gave every tenant. "Important notice," I said softly. He barely muttered a thanks before shoving it into his pocket. Later that night, as I walked the halls, I heard it. The raised voices behind the thin walls of apartment 3B. Daniel's anger exploded first. "Tripled? This has to be a mistake." Sophia's voice, sharp and panicked. "We can't afford this. Not with the kids, not with the bills." Their words spilled into the hallway like sweet music. Every syllable a repayment for the humiliation they once fed me. I pressed my palm against the wall, steadying myself as a wave of satisfaction surged through me. Finally, they were the ones scrambling. Finally, they felt the fear of being pushed out, the shame of not being able to keep up. In the days that followed, Daniel stormed down to the office, demanding answers. He slammed the notice onto the desk. "This is outrageous. We've been here for years." I sat across from him, hidden behind the guise of management, calm as still water. "The market rate has shifted," I explained, my tone clipped but professional. "Your apartment is still below value. You should be grateful." His face turned red. His fists clenched. He wanted to scream at me, I could see it, but he needed me. And that gave me the upper hand. Sophia came later, her voice softer, pleading. She tried to smile, to appeal to sympathy. "Please, we have children. Surely you can make an exception." Oh, how I remembered begging those same words on her couch, suitcase at my feet. "Please, Sophia. I have nowhere else to go." And her cold reply, "You'll have to figure something out." So I leaned forward and said the same to her. Word for word. Her face drained of color. She stared at me, then really stared, as if something in my tone clawed at her memory. But before she could place me, I slid the paper back across the desk. "You'll have to figure something out." Her lips parted. No words came. She left in silence. And I sat there, savoring the delicious symmetry of it all. The trap was tightening. Their savings would bleed out month by month. Their pride would crumble under the weight of bills they couldn't pay. And soon enough, they would know exactly what it felt like to be cast out. Only this time, it would not be me dragging the suitcase into the street. It would be them. The beauty of revenge is not always in the final blow. Sometimes it's in watching the cracks spread, slow, relentless, impossible to hide. And I saw those cracks every day in apartment 3B. First, it was subtle. Sophia and Daniel's voices rose more often behind closed doors. The children, once cheerful in the hallways, now walked with their heads down, their laughter replaced by whispers. Grocery bags grew lighter, filled with fewer treats and more bulk rice. I knew the signs. I had lived them myself. Each month, the rent drained them further. Daniel took on extra shifts. Sophia stopped buying new clothes for the kids. I caught her once in the stairwell, clutching a bill with tears in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away when she saw me, forcing a brittle smile. That smile broke something in me. Not sympathy, no. It was the final confirmation that she now lived in the same humiliation she had thrown at me. The walls of their marriage began to shake. One evening, as I checked the mailboxes, I heard shouting that spilled into the corridor. Daniel's voice thundered. "We can't keep this up, Sophia. We're drowning." Her reply came sharp, bitter. "Maybe if you were smarter with money, we wouldn't be here." I stood in the shadows, listening. Their fight clawed through the walls like wildfire. The children cried softly in the background. And I thought of the night I begged her not to throw me out, the night my own pleas had bounced off her cold heart. Now it was her turn to beg, not to me but to life itself. Weeks turned into months, and the building itself became a mirror of their decline. Daniel's shoulders hunched lower with each passing day. Sophia's once polished appearance dulled, her face lined with worry. Even the children grew quieter, as if they could sense the storm brewing between their parents. And I walked past them every day with my head high, a queen surveying her domain. But revenge is not only about pain, it is about control. So I tested them. When a faucet broke in their kitchen, I delayed the repair. Just a little. Enough to make them sweat. When they asked for leniency on rent, I gave them deadlines sharp as blades. I never shouted, never threatened. I didn't have to. The rules spoke for themselves. Sophia came to my office once, desperate. Her eyes were red, her voice shaking. "Please," she whispered. "The children, they need stability." Oh, how familiar that plea was. I leaned back, folding my hands. "Stability comes with responsibility," I replied coldly. Her mouth trembled as if she wanted to argue, but she didn't dare. She only nodded and left, her shoulders heavy with defeat. The cracks widened. Daniel stopped greeting neighbors. Sophia stopped making eye contact. Their arguments grew louder, more frequent. The children clung to each other, their innocence chipped away by the tension at home. Every moment of their unraveling was a stitch in the tapestry of justice I had waited so long to weave. And still they had no idea it was me, the mother they had discarded, the extra mouth they had thrown to the streets. They were so busy battling each other that they never once thought to look at me closely. And that was the sweetest part of it all. Because the cracks in their family were only the beginning. Soon the entire foundation would collapse. And when it did, I would be there standing tall, watching it fall to dust. For months I kept my mask on. To them, I was just the silent manager, the woman in work clothes with paint on her hands and papers in her arms. They never looked twice, never thought to connect me with the mother they had cast out. But I had waited long enough. The day came when Daniel stormed into the office, his face red with fury, the latest overdue notice crumpled in his fist. Sophia trailed behind him, pale and trembling. "This is impossible." Daniel slammed the paper on my desk. "We can't pay this. We've done everything we can. You're bleeding us dry." His voice cracked under the weight of desperation. Sophia placed a hand on his arm, her own voice breaking. "Please, please, there must be something you can do. We're not bad tenants. We've lived here for years. The children." Her words dissolved into a sob. I sat there, calm, hands folded neatly, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto Sophia's. "Tell me," I said softly, "how does it feel to beg for a home? To fear losing the roof over your children's heads?" Sophia's eyes widened. Her lips parted as recognition began to flicker in her gaze. She studied my face, the lines of age, the shape of my mouth, the voice she once knew better than her own heartbeat. And then it hit her. "Mom," she whispered. Daniel's head snapped toward me. Confusion painted across his face. What is she talking about? I didn't look at him. My eyes stayed fixed on Sophia. "Yes," I said, my voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "It's me. The extra mouth you threw onto the street. The burden you couldn't bear. The mother you abandoned." Her knees buckled and she grabbed the edge of the desk. No, this can't." "Oh, but it is," I cut in sharply. "Every notice. Every payment. Every sleepless night you've had these past months. All of it came from my hand." Daniel sputtered, his bravado faltering. You own this building?" "Yes," I replied. My voice was calm, deliberate, each word falling like a hammer. "I own every brick, every nail, every lock on these doors. And you, Daniel, you pay me to live here. You pay me to breathe under my roof." The room went silent except for Sophia's ragged breaths. Tears slid down her cheeks as her face crumbled under the weight of shame. "Why?" she finally whispered. "Why would you do this to us?" I rose from my chair slowly, towering over them though my body was small and frail. "Because you did it to me. You cast me out when I had nowhere to go. You looked at your own mother and saw nothing but an extra mouth. Do you know what that felt like? Do you know what it's like to sit at a bus stop in the freezing cold, with no home, no family, no dignity?" Sophia sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking. Daniel stood stiff beside her, his pride collapsing with every word I spoke. "You thought I was disposable," I said. "But I survived. And not only that, I built something greater than you could ever imagine. While you called me a burden, I became the one who holds your future in my hands." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Neither of them dared to speak. I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut. "You wanted me gone. Now I decide when you go." Their faces told the story: shock, fear, humiliation. And in that moment I felt the scales balance. The pain they had given me had come full circle. The reveal was complete. I stood before them steady as stone, while their world trembled. Sophia's tears had soaked the papers on my desk, her hands trembling as she tried to form words. Daniel had gone pale. His bravado burned to ash. They were both smaller now, stripped of arrogance, stripped of certainty. For once they were the ones begging. I took a slow breath, letting the silence hang heavy before I delivered the words that would seal their fate. You have 30 days. Daniel's head jerked up. What? 30 days? I repeated, my voice calm but firm. That's how long you have to find another place. After that, you're out. Sophia's knees gave way, and she collapsed into the chair across from me. Please, Mom, she whispered, her voice raw and broken. Don't do this to the children. Don't punish them for our mistakes. Her words pierced me. For a fleeting second, I saw the little girl she once was, the child who used to slip her hand into mine while we crossed the street, the one who used to beg me to sing her to sleep. A wave of sorrow threatened to soften me. But then I remembered the night she told me I was an extra mouth. I remembered the sting of standing on the porch as the door shut in my face, the cold seeping into my bones while my own daughter turned her back on me. No, this wasn't cruelty. This was justice. The children, I said evenly, deserve parents who understand loyalty, sacrifice, and love. Perhaps this will teach you. Daniel slammed his fist against the desk. You can't do this. We'll fight you. I leaned forward unshaken, my eyes drilling into his. Try. But every contract, every paper, every law is in my favor. You live under my roof. And I decide when that ends. His mouth opened but no words came. He knew I was right. Sophia buried her face in her hands, her sobs echoing through the office. I never thought it would come to this, she whispered. I thought you'd forgive me. I walked around the desk, my footsteps slow, deliberate. I placed a hand on her shoulder, not with tenderness, but with the weight of finality. I did forgive you, I said softly. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequence. You made your choice. And now you live with it. The room went still. The only sound was Sophia's broken sobbing, Daniel's shallow breaths, and the clock ticking on the wall. I straightened, pulling my coat tighter around me, and walked to the door. Before stepping out, I turned back one final time. This building is mine. Your lives here are mine. And when the 30 days end, your chapter here will close forever. With that, I left them in their silence, their shame, their despair. The weeks that followed were filled with whispers among the tenants. Everyone saw the once proud family scramble, selling off furniture, begging for loans, struggling to find a place they could afford. Their pride crumbled in public, their humiliation complete. And when the 30th day arrived, I watched from the corner window as the moving truck pulled away. Sophia stood on the sidewalk, her face streaked with tears, her children clutching her skirt. Daniel avoided my gaze, his head bowed in defeat. For the first time in years I felt whole. I had taken back my dignity, my power, my voice. I wasn't an extra mouth. I was the woman who built, who endured, who triumphed. And as they walked away from the building they once thought was theirs, I whispered to myself, justice served.